Welcome to TRF Tuesday. This is Trauma Research Foundation's weekly mini workshop series from bright and diverse voices in therapeutic embodiment. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the TRF channel. It lets YouTube know that you find this content valuable, and then they'll spread the word by showing it to more people. We'll take questions from the audience at the end of the session. Just drop them in the chat. And we're so happy to have you at today's MindBodySpeak session. It's entitled Inner Strength. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you our presenter. As a performance artist, Marshall Davis Jones thought having the right words was enough. But after exploring movement practices and their connection to sound, he discovered you could improve your life if you could improve your voice. MindBodySpeak is his unique approach beyond words to address the power of the voice. He's trained voices from law enforcement to luxury insurance agencies. He's spoken on TEDx stages. In this series, he offers his voice to help you find the way back to yours. Marshall, thanks so much for being here. Take it away.
All right, now, thank you very much for having me. So this is what I call module 0, and this is before we begin. And I like to start here because the very first place I like to start is how horrifying and mortifying it is to just start talking. Not giving a speech, not doing some major presentation, not even an impending argument. To the body, just saying hello, how's the weather, is enough for you to get a false high blood pressure reading at the hospital. In the 70s, they discovered, once they figured out that they can digitally measure heart rate, they figured out, wait a minute, when the nurse is just saying, hey, how you doing? People are all having like hypertension. And they realized that just vocalizing was enough. And so a lot of times people come to an approach like this and they're thinking, I'm scared to talk. And I think about talking from a big presentation perspective. And I let them know right away, listen, everyone's mortified. The body doesn't really want to make vocalization unless it really has to. So anyone in here that's like, oh my gosh, I feel like the worst person on earth because I can't talk to people. I feel nervous when talking to people. It's like, no, it's okay. Everybody does. Everybody has the pre-performance jitters when speaking to new people, but just when speaking to anyone that we know. In fact, if you really think about the closest relationships that we have, they're really bound by the speed with which we can find silence, right? It's the people that we don't have to say much to in order to feel we're connected with. So I really want us to, as we explore this, think about not necessarily wanting to speak better, but wanting to find the path to silence as efficiently and as calmly as possible. And that's what we're here to discuss. So let's look at something called this ultradian rhythm. Sort of like our sleep patterns, where we have a good rest, deep rest, and somewhere in the middle of the night, we wake up and, we're like, oh, well, maybe I can go back to sleep, or I can check my TikTok or Instagram or whatever social network we're using. And then we go through that cycle again, like light sleep, good sleep, deep sleep. Alarm goes off, we wake up. Now, this rhythm happens at night, but it also happens while we are awake. And this ultradian rhythm is a pretty demanding one. And it shifts around every 90 minutes. There's a few things that do this, like we have nostril dominance that changes. And so when you think about one nostril is doing all of the work, and then somewhere in the middle of the day, you're like, oh, this nostril's a little stopped up, and the other one's more open. Well, your body's doing that back and forth all day. And with that rhythm, there's changes in our neurology, there's changes in our sympathetic nervous system, there's changes in neural activity because now we're opening one pathway a little bit more than another. But what do you think would need to happen at an interval of every 90 minutes? When we think about a NASCARs go around in a circle, and zoom, zoom, zoom. And then they go to the pit stop and they don't stay there all day. They don't stay there for 20 years. They don't stay there for 20 minutes. It's like back on the road. So the curiosity is, if the body requires this reset every 90 minutes, what can we do in that kind of time? Now, I want you to know that the chat is open, and I'm just curious about what you think could happen every 90 minutes. Before I go and start giving off anything or saying anything, I'm going to find this chat window. Just type, give me an idea. What is something that you could do every 90 minutes to reset yourself? Let's see here. Let me go and run the chat. Someone said, hydrate, deep breathing, breathe, yawn, breathe, walk, stand up, walk around, look far away, stretch, move, stretch, vocalize. Mary said the bathroom. That is an option, isn't it? Focus on your breath and shake. Self-care, presence, breathing deeply, count your breaths, moving. Man, let me tell you something. Y'all are here. Like, we have ideas. Be aware that 90 minutes have passed. Breathe with that awareness of time. Boom. Thank you very much for everyone. Hum, sigh. So statistically speaking, there was a sense of breathing, movement, stretching, and some other things. But for the most part, breathing, moving, stretching. Now, what if I told you there was something that the body does that pretty much combines all of those things? I think you already know what it is, and someone already threw it in there. But let's get some samples, all right? We're gonna look at the yawn stretch, and we're gonna look at the square breath. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's see some examples. This is Fido. Front legs, back legs, the jaw muscles wagging the tail. Good boy. Now this is Fifi, and that's just relaxing. And now here's Oscar the owl. And I mean, that's talent. And then you look right here and get one, and see. Now, the animal kingdom does this many times a day, like a lot. Now, notice none of these animals are getting up to do something, but what they are doing is they are squeezing and compressing all of the muscles that are required for them to move through the world. And you can see that really with the difference between the dog and the bird. So, the dog's like, all right, let me get the jaw going. Let me get my front legs, hind legs. All right, cool. The cat's like, that's pretty similar. But then with the bird, you see the neck and the rotation, like just really turning, getting that wing action in there. There was another one kind of shaking a wing out, and then they just relax. Now, why is that? Before we even explore thinking about it, I invite all of us to go ahead and take a nice 10-second yawn stretch. I can't see you. It's up to you, but I'm gonna do it myself. Oh my goodness. But I want you to be asymmetrical about it. Let the body tell you exactly which way it wants to move, how it wants to do this, because it'll tell you. If you allow it, it'll show you exactly what you need. Oh, man. I had the opportunity to do this a few times a day, and it never not feels good. But I do want to ask, how many people, be honest, if this was the first time that you did that today, hit the chat right now. Let us know. Don't be embarrassed. It's okay. If it's the first time you did it. Nancy said yes. Cameron Lee. Wow. It is rolling in. There's a lot of people today. That was the first time. Darlene said, nah, I was at yoga this morning. So, I was here a little bit. Stanley says the second. Okay, okay. Wow. All right. So we have a few first times, second times, resonance breathing. Oh, okay. Okay, Helena. I appreciate you sharing that. All right. So what if I told you that if the body needs that at every 90 minutes, that man, the first time we're chasing a clock. But what do you think happens with something that the body can use every 90 minutes? What do you think happens if you miss that one day and that one day turns into a week? And then that week becomes a month. And then that month becomes a year. What do you think would happen over time? And it's so simple. It's so simple. Someone said perpetual stress. Darlene said that sounds awful. Atrophy. Why are these animals doing this? Like, what would possess creatures to like make this movement so often? But there's a few things that happen when you are in this kind of movement. Shirley's like, yeah, your joints get stiff and sometimes stuck. Oh, yes. So the body does this or demands this of us for this reason. When we sit still for any long period of time, it's the equivalent of a car with the lights on and the engine not running, right? What happens? Eventually, the battery dies. It's not dead, but it becomes unable to just connect to your car and get your car going. So what's required? What's required is a jump. So you take the two cables, you get another car, and it's like, it's the equivalent of needing a friend to kind of like wake you up, say, hey, there you go. What are you doing? The thing is that the body itself needs this jump. So this jump, this feeling, this yawn stretch, what that does is it sends that jump through the neuromuscular system. It's basically like, okay, my muscles are online. They're all here. I'm squeezing them so that the body can do what it needs to do. You might notice that this is something that we do first thing in the morning, and we associate it with the first thing in the morning for good reason. But what's happening first thing in the morning, you've laid dormant for a long period of time. And now your mind-body connection needs to come back online. So it goes, you squeeze your toes, you twist everything, and that says, okay, we're ready to meet the day. We don't practice this throughout our lives, probably because in the third grade or in, Form 3, if you're outside of the States, right? Someone said to you that yawning was rude. And so you don't do it. It means that you're bored, or it means that you're being disrespectful. And then what happens? For the rest of your life, whenever your body needs that, you don't use it. And so what I'd like for you to do is I want you to first commit to the 90 minutes. Can I get a commitment? We're going to be here for 4 weeks, but can I get a commitment from everyone that's on here today that they will do this every 90 minutes? All right, we got a lot of, okay, I see some people. I'm going to tell you why this is important here. I had an aeronautics engineer tell me that when they build planes, they say that any idea that they use, they say that nature would have beaten us to it. And so when we think about that, this is something that nature's beaten us to. I didn't make it up. I didn't invent it. Neither did the saber-toothed tiger, and neither did the panda bears, and neither did, the hippopotamus, any of these creatures that practice this thing. We all have this inclination. Snakes do it. If you look this up online, it's hilarious. But you make this commitment And I'll tell you what, whenever I work with anyone, we usually have like a relationship that lasts for a little while. And the weeks that they come in stressed, I'm like, hey, so how is the yawn stretching and the thing? And they're like, oh, I haven't been doing it. I was like, well, right. This isn't about making your problems go away. This is about giving your body its best opportunity to meet the moment. Because we move through life. We move from one place to another. Even when we think or we ruminate, usually our decisions require movement into that thing. And sometimes we're tense and we're afraid and we're nervous and we have memories that flood our muscular system. As anyone that is a part of this community is very well aware that this is how the body can hold on to things, right? So you have to give yourself that opportunity to revitalize consistently so that you don't get to a place where your body puts you down. Because that's the other option. The other option is, you let it go for a while. And then your body goes, oh, okay. How about this? And then you're in bed for like 10 days, or you're like extra lethargic. So this is our anti-burnout. And I got a lot of commitments here. And I love, 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 love how we're going about it. Someone said, what's going on? We're talking very simply about yawn stretching. The very fancy word is pandiculation, if you want to look that up. And getting everyone to commit to doing it every 90 minutes. If you have a pet at home, hit the chat. Because if you have a pet at home, you have an unfair advantage because your dog or your cat is going to show you how many times to do it a day. I had one person tell me that their dog could tell. And so the dog would be like, oh, yeah, this is what we're doing here. Next thing you know, your dog is leading your asanas. You know what I mean? So come to nature, right? Return to nature because nature's has been smarter than us for quite a while. So let us follow. So Tammy asks, is it something you suggest setting a timer for until it becomes a habit? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Set a timer. Like, if you don't have a pet at home that can show you the way, go ahead and grab yourself, get your phone going. And it doesn't take long because it feels so good. Like once you get into the habit of allowing yourself to do it, you're going to be like, man, you'll be like, forget every 90 minutes. You'll just be doing it whenever. It feels great. Even doing it 5 minutes ago, if I do it right now, it's like, wow, it feels nice, right? So yeah, don't worry about it. So let us move forward here. And let's see, square breathing. So before I get into this, I want to look at something in here. This muscle. This is muscle inside the chest. It's a very underrepresented muscle in the muscular system. It's called the transversus thoracis. It's like the anatomy people just said, oh, it's not important. Oh, it's just in there behind the sternum. And it is considered a primary respiratory muscle. And if you look at this circle right here, that's a nice little long artery that's like right in there. This muscle, as we get older, actually gets more active and stronger. And notice where it is. What else happens behind here, right? Tension and tightness from all sorts of things. And so I want you, when you start to do your yawn stretch and in the subsequent square breathing, I want you to bring a certain relaxation to this area. If you can do that right now for me, just bring an awareness here. You hear a lot about speaking from the heart. And it's beautifully metaphorical. And I like metaphors. I like poetry. But this muscle, It fascinates me because when you cough, when you sneeze, when you move, when you lift your leg, I mean, there's not many things the body does that this muscle doesn't react or respond to. So I want you to relax right in here. Take that moment. And whenever you do your yawn stretching and rotating, you're actually getting that muscle to work. The muscle's called the transversus thoracis. For anyone wanting to Google that, or if they want to look it up at ChatGPT, not promoting for any endorsements, but just in case, right? Now let's move on. Box breathing, pretty familiar, right? You inhale for a certain amount. I like 5 seconds. You and you hold the breath. And then you exhale 5 seconds. And then before you breathe in again, you hold the breath. But here is where I want to offer or submit a slight adjustment to this. When you inhale, I want you to slowly open your palm as you inhale. And as you hold the breath, I want you to keep the hands gently open. Then as you exhale, slowly close the fingers gently. It's almost like you're making it's like you're holding something in your hand. And then keeping the air out of the body, hold the breath, keep the hands gently closed. And then we're going to do that whole process again. So inhale, hold the breath, exhale, hold the breath. And we're going to do this for 3 rounds. And after those 3 rounds, I can talk to you about what just happened. Okay. So on the clock, 3, 2, 1, follow me. Inhale, opening the fingers slowly. Hold the breath, keeping the fingers open. Exhale slowly, closing the fingers. Keeping the air out of the body. Hold. Inhale, opening the fingers one more time as you do so, keeping them open. Out, closing the fingers gently, keeping the fingers closed. One more time. Inhale, opening the fingers slowly. Hold the breath. Closing the fingers gently on the exhale. Hold the breath. Now, as you return to your natural breathing pattern, I want you to become aware of this synchronicity between the inhale and the exhale here at the hands. And here is why. When we breathe unconsciously, the brain is using one system. The minute that you shift your breathing to a conscious state of breathing that you are controlling, it's a completely different system in your brain that is controlling that. But not only is that system activated, there's a synchronicity between the opening of the hands and the inhalation, and sort of an antagonism with the closing of the hands and exhalation. So you feel this sort of full body breathing here all the way at the hands. And what makes this very important as far as communicating is concerned, and particularly when we talk about this sense of inner strength, we look at pandiculation and it gets the muscles going and it reminds the body that it is here to move. And then when we decided we're going to consciously execute on something, we want to have a sense of mindfulness in the moment. 25% of the brain's motor strip goes to the hands. So 25% of the brain's pathways of movement is devoted to what you are doing with your hands. The idea that when you breathe manually, that there's a manual dexterous component to the breathing brings the mindful awareness of breathing to a different level. Now, I know most of you may be familiar with like, mudras or certain hand symbols that are associated with like a meditation practice or something like that. But you also might be aware of certain things like Tai Chi, where, you're moving and you're sort of flowing. And you might not necessarily be thinking about this in this way, but there's a synchrony between your mind and what your potential is with your hands. And so as you move through this, as we spend time for the next 4 weeks, this is the foundation before anything else. You want to be able to get a handle on things and get a grip on the topics of life, the ideas of life. And so when we say be mindful of our breath, be mindful of our bodies, it's what we do with these ultimately. And I know that there's some of us that have had challenges where they may not have a hand physically, but we hear about phantom limbs, and there's some sort of neurological presence that the brain still holds on to, even though there might not be one here. So even for those, like to say, like, listen, man, I lost my left hand or left arm in an accident, or I didn't have one. I don't want you to feel like this process of the motor energy that comes from the nerves down the arm when you control your breathing, that's absent from you, because you just as well have this access and capacity. So these are the two things. But we recap. We yawn stretch because it helps to reset our nervous system. It helps to juice our muscles and bring vitality and remind us that we are here to move. We square breathe because it helps to reset the respiratory system, but it also gives us an opportunity to get a handle on a situation because we are now synchronizing our breath with our hands. And if we want to be able to really get a hold of this, all I want you to focus on for the next 7 days is giving yourself every 90 minutes to go through this process. Go ahead and yawn stretch. It takes 10 seconds, right? And then if you go through the square breathing, where you inhale for 5 seconds, hold the breath, exhale for 5 seconds, hold the breath, and synchronize that with your hands, which is a very important part. If you do that for 3 rounds, it takes a minute. If you did it for 1 round, it takes 20 seconds. So in as little as 30 seconds, you can return to yourself, because we don't always have time to stop and, pull into our classes that we have. We don't always have time to take a long moment. But if you can give yourself that 30 seconds at the very least to return, right? That is enough to begin to get that manual mindfulness going. You want to have control of your vehicle, control of yourself, and be able to do the magic with your hands that you are meant to do in this life. So for this time, for right now, I bid you adieu. And I leave room for any questions, any ideas. That is our time today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marshall. That was wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marshall. That was so cool.
I really like the animation you had. It helps with the timing to get it, so it feels natural for me, at least. So I thought that was a nice touch. And we do have a few minutes to take questions. If anyone wants to drop a question in the chat, Marshall's going to hang out for another minute or two, right? And we'll answer some questions.
I loved having permission to do my yawn stretch as frequently as possible. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me one time, like in a live session, like I was watching her, she refused. Then she said that her teacher would make her students sing their yawns. So every student was thoroughly embarrassed, and she kept that. And that was from the 4th grade. I'm like, from the 4th grade, you have denied yourself.
Wow.
I know. Such a simple thing, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'll tell you in the chat, there's lots of fabulous. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Marshall. Thank you so much. A lot of really positive response.
Someone's asking, how often do you recommend doing the breathing exercise, the box breathing?
So I like to recommend that, when you do your yarn stretch, it's like, oh, let me take a moment to, recalibrate with my hands. It's so you follow that every 90-minute interval. But I also find that anytime that you find yourself manually controlling your breathing, meaning like you stop and you like take a breath, that you remember that your hands are involved, that you immediately don't just go, that you're like, so that synchronicity or that synchrony is embodied all the way through, because that would be the most full moment and movement. So yeah, it's like the yawn stretching thing. It's like again, if you have an animal to help you, or doing it more often than when you wake up, it's one of those habits that starts to self-reinforce because it feels nice, right? So it's when I say like every 90 minutes, that'll last for like 3 days, because after the 3rd day or 4th day, you're just gonna be like, oh, like, it's like Mary was saying, like, oh, I feel free to do it, right? And that permission, right? You're on like a call like this. You know how many Zoom calls last for like 3 hours? You're just like because you feel nervous. Like if you did this, like, oh, that's unprofessional. It's like, don't care.
I'm bringing this back to Trauma Research Foundation. We are on a lot of Zooms. We're a virtual organization. So I'm going to encourage everyone to be doing their pandiculation throughout the meetings, throughout the day. There's
a good question here, if you're willing to answer it, Marshall. What got you curious about somatic regulation? And they just said that they like the metaphor that you use for getting the handle on things.
So I began doing this, like, I wanted my voice to be deep enough so that people can like my poems. That's actually where it started. Like, I was a professional poet. I had a voice that was significantly higher than this. Like, this was my regular speaking voice, and it was higher than this. And that was how I spoke. And I was doing well doing poems. But then I heard this guy get on stage that was a friend of mine, and he had this power in his voice. And I was like, I want that power, right? But what wound up happening as I started to like research things over time, embodied cognition, this term, embodied cognition, the idea that the mind and the body, or that the body informed the mind, it started to make all these weird metaphors, like make me wonder, like, wait, was that a metaphor the whole time? Or was it something else, or a different kind of intelligence that we were coming to by way of language? And that really, the thing that actually shifted the trajectory, to be very fair, was being invited to a school district where students were committing suicide. And it was a very wealthy school district. And so it was very, very hush, hush, hush. Like, you don't want people to know that the kids in the local high schools were so overwhelmed that they would self-eliminate, like at the train station, and let the train hit them. And they wanted me to do some workshops, some poetry workshops at the time. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll go and, kind of suss out what's going on. I speak at one school on Friday. The other school I'm supposed to speak at on Monday. I get an email on Sunday that a student from the other school had jumped in front of the train Saturday night. And I remember thinking to myself, no one's really going to want to hear poetry on Monday, And there was this book that came across my desk called The Ear and the Voice. It's a really good book. I recommend it, by Alfred Tomatis. And he told us that we were a listening species and how powerful the ear was. And I remember going into the classroom, not knowing what to say, but somehow we decided to sing. And so everyone sang Hakuna Matata. And this young lady was sitting in my class, face planted on the desk, and she just starts sobbing. Come to find out that the young person who self-eliminated was her best friend, and we actually were sitting in a classroom right by the train station, or right by the train tracks. And we put our hands on her shoulder. And I remember thinking to myself as I went home that I had it wrong the whole time. That as much as I valued being a good speaker, it's like that kid might have needed somebody to listen. And whatever became too much was too much. And so it changed the trajectory of what I was looking for in voice work. It changed the trajectory of what I cared about in doing this. And so I started to apply my mind to understanding both sides of this communication, not just wanting to be heard, but wanting to make sure that I can hear and that I can teach others to hear as well, even if it's not listening to me, listening to others, to be there for others. And yeah, that's what it was.
Oh, Marshall, great story. Thank you. Thanks so much for being with us. This was such an enlightening and fun session. We really appreciate your being here, and we look forward to next week. A big thank you to our audience. We offer this program for you, whether you're already in our community or new to TRF. You'll find the past session of all of our TRF Tuesday in the library under our resources tab on the website. Behind the scenes, working hard, our TRF team members, Pat Murray, Star Muhammad, Connor McCann, and I'm Mary Frangie. We look forward to seeing you all next time. Join us next week with Marshall. Bye, everyone.
All right, now, take care.